Hello everyone. This week in the UK, it's not that great to be English, it's slightly worse to be Welsh, and it is probably one of the worst weeks of your life if you are Scottish. As for Northern Ireland, well, nothing ever seems to happen over there. So for those of you that aren't political junkies like me, and especially for those of you that don't care about the politics of the UK, you may be asking, what the hell could have happened this week that is so much worse than the rest of them? Well, we may as well get the worst of it out of the way first. The Scottish Parliament sent out this tweet. The Hate Crime and Public Order Scotland Bill has been passed, with 82 yeses, 32 noes, and 4 abstained. And for those of you that don't know, yes, this bill is as bad as it sounds. According to the BBC, they asked the question, what does the Scottish Government want to do when it comes to hate crime? The government asked a senior judge, Lord Bracadale, to examine all of the country's existing hate crime legislation to make sure it was still fit for purpose in the 21st century. And that judge should have come back and said, no, get rid of all this, it goes against common law and the tradition of the British way of life. It then introduced the Hate Crime and Public Order Bill to the Scottish Parliament in response to his recommendations. Yes, we have activists with judges all over the UK, but for some reason especially in Scotland. The bill adds hate crime based on a person's age to the list of protected groups, with hatred based on someone's sex potentially to be added in the future. It aims to simplify and clarify the law by bringing together the various existing hate crime laws into a single piece of legislation. And it creates a new crime of stirring up hatred against the protected groups, which is defined as behaving in a threatening or abusive manner or communicating threatening or abusive material to another person. And this, at least for those of us that enjoy liberty, and especially for those of us who live in Scotland and enjoy liberty, Mr. Count Dankula and Mr. Tailed Feature, hi da. They will continuously point out, as I will as well, that stirring up hatred and being abusive are quite subjective terms. What does it mean to stir up hatred? What specific act would be considered stirring up hatred? Obviously, no one is going to deny that this can absolutely happen if you're at the front of a crowd shouting, we need to tear down this market stall full of people of colour, though of course people who would actually do that would use completely different language. That would obviously be considered morally bad, and believe it or not, was already a crime before this Hate Crime and Public Order Bill was passed. As for what else is covered by abuse, well, we will get into that a little bit later. So the bill originally said that it could be with the intention of stirring up hatred against someone from a protected group, or where it is likely consequence that hatred will be stirred up against such a group. Again, what does it mean to stir up hatred? What does this mean? And what if the hatred is justified in some way? Such as it was in World War II, where there was a lot of stirring up of hatred against a particular Austrian painter and his political group. Would this be considered a hate crime by the Scottish Government? However, the Scottish Government has now said that the bill will be amended to ensure that only people who intended to stir up hatred will be prosecuted, which is another large issue because how the hell are you even supposed to determine that? As we saw with the Count Dankula case, it was never Count Dankula's intention to stir up hatred against a group, and yet he was still charged for it. So I can't see this being any better. In fact, it's probably going to make things a hell of a lot worse. The bill also formally abolishes the offence of blasphemy, which has not been prosecuted in Scotland for more than 175 years. So apparently, you can't stir up hatred against a group, but you are allowed to stir up hatred against God. If you said that to someone 100 years ago in Scotland or the UK, they would think you are out of your mind. The government says the bill makes it clear to victims, perpetrators and communities, and to wider society that offences motivated by prejudice will be treated more seriously and will not be tolerated by society. So nanny statism is essentially the reason this bill has been brought forward by Humza Yousaf and passed by pretty much everyone apart from the Tories in Scotland. So mere minutes after this vote was passed, Humza Yousaf decided to tweet this out. Delighted that the hate crime bill has passed and supported by every party in the parliament except the Tories. Bill provides protection for those who are targets of hate crime while protecting freedom of speech. X to doubt. From racism to homophobia and everything in between, there is no room for hate. And that's apparently what justifies this law. There is no room for hate. Despite the fact, Humza, that it seems to imply that you hate Tories because they did not vote for your precious legislation through. Yet you didn't protect people based on their political leanings, despite the fact they are indeed a group that you can easily classify. He also added this: threshold of stirring up offences is very high behaviour. Has to be, brackets, considered by a reasonable person. So if you ask me, that's quite offensive to unreasonable people, who again you can group together, to be threatening or abusive. Okay, again, threatening, that is quite self-explanatory and not out of the realms of a reasonable law. You can't threaten to kill someone. But abusive? All abusive means is grossly offensive. And again, that's already a law. Count Dankula was punished by this law. It also has to be intended to stir up hatred. Again, how do you even prove that? A reasonableness defence exists. I don't know what the hell he means by a reasonableness defence exists, but whatever. And finally, freedom of expression clause gives further safeguards. Again, he doesn't go into that at all. And because of that, I am completely unconvinced by Humza that this law does protect free speech in any way. You don't protect free speech by passing a law that completely undermines free speech. This is peak I support free speech, but. And of course, this hypocrisy did not go unnoticed. Murdo Fraser, a Tory member of the Scottish Parliament, tweeted this: "A shameful day for Scotland as the hate crime bill passes. A law that will restrict free speech and ludicrously give more protections to men who dress in women's clothes than to women themselves." Which is a bit of a turf argument, but honestly I just want to focus on the free speech issue at the moment. And just for a quick context to why he said that, this hate crime bill does have trans people as a protected class, but not women or men. So that's why he said that. So Humza Yousaf replied to this saying, "Never mind if you're a Jewish person who suffers anti-Semitism." Okay, what do you mean by suffers anti-Semitism? That is a large umbrella term that can range from anything from someone calling them a nasty anti-Semitic name to reciting the more genocidal parts of Mein Kampf to them. A disabled person who is abused, well guess what? Abuse is already a crime. A person who is gay or lesbian threatened simply for who you love, again, already a crime. A trans person beaten up for who you are. Okay, for some reason he's gone from just speech laws to beating trans people up. Because this is the way that these people think. They equate words with violence when they are by no means the same thing. Apparently, giving you protection in law is a shameful day. They already had protection in laws from all of these, apart from the first one, which again is an umbrella term which could include physical attacks. So, Humza, this is an absolutely moronic tweet to make. But you got your wish as a hate crime bill, so unlucky da, you can no longer say the N-word on stream. And I would like to remind everyone of this particular clip of Humza Yousaf, and I would really like to know whether he thinks this should be considered a hate crime or not.
Most senior positions in Scotland are filled almost exclusively by those who are white. Take my portfolio alone. The Lord President, white. The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white. The Chief Constable, white. Every Deputy Chief Constable, white. Every Assistant Chief Constable, white. The Head of the Law Society, white. The Head of the Faculty of Advocates, white. Every prison governor, white. And not just justice. The Chief Medical Officer, white. The Chief Nursing Officer, white. The Chief Veterinary Officer, white. The Chief Social Work Advisor, white. Almost every trade union in this country headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public body is white.
So, Mr. Yousaf, would you argue that this is stirring up hatred against a protected group? Or are white people not considered a protected group in your hate crime law? And if not, I would absolutely love to know why not. Anyway, that's enough about hate crime for one day. The next story, which is probably actually more ridiculous, is based off the story of Sarah Everard, who was a woman in her 20s who recently disappeared, and then human remains were found in Kent, and they can't identify the body from the remains. And from there, a Met police officer, so a police officer from London, has been taken into custody as he is the prime suspect. Unfortunately, all news articles at the moment just tell me about the Met officer's head wound, and he was taken to hospital, when really the more interesting story is how the investigation's going. But anyway, what I want to talk about is the huge reaction to this. So one of the less ridiculous but still ridiculous things comes from Jess Phillips. Jess Phillips MP reads the names of the women killed in the UK in the last year where a man has been convicted or charged as the main perpetrator, and it takes her 4 minutes. Now, this comes as no surprise, as Jess Phillips is a militant feminist who also is very bad at taking a joke. So I think it's perfectly normal for her to get a long list of killed women, those only killed by men of course, and read the list aloud to Parliament for an emotional reaction. Though of course the Office for National Statistics kind of undermines this whole emotional point. They point out that the homicide rate was 11.7 per million, with the rate for males, which was 17 per million, was almost 3 times that for females, which was only 6 per million. And this apparently is a higher difference than the previous years, so 2019, because of a 20% increase in the number of male victims, from 422 to 506, and a 16% decrease in the number of female victims from 225 to 188. So, incredibly, in previous years, this list would have been longer for Jess Phillips to read out, and it would have been over 12 minutes worth of Parliament's time if she only read out the men's names that were murdered. So well done, Jess. You brought this to my attention. I went in to read this, and once again, one of your stupid feminist points is completely undermined by the statistics. I can't wait till you laugh at the idea of males committing suicide and that being brought to the Women and Equalities meeting again, you ideological freak. But as I say, this is just Jess Phillips being an idiot, which is not out of the ordinary. What is slightly more ridiculous is what this woman had to say on BBC Breakfast. This is Maya Tutton, a campaigner as the BBC describe her, I don't know for what, but I assume for feminist causes, and she is trying to describe what a male ally is. Let's have a listen.
In these conversations, it's really important for us to think about what men can do and what their role is. And I think it's really, really important on a day like today and this week for, I think, men to reflect on their own behaviour and what they can do to help. I think it has to be collective. So
come on, today.
I would really echo and what's been said. We need men to call out sexist jokes.
Jesus Christ. I know she's going off the cuff, but you have to see the ridiculousness of conflating the murder of an innocent woman with sexist jokes. How is she being taken seriously?
To not allow any sexual harassment to happen in their orbit, and that's in the workplace or in public space.
Many don't, and many do call it out. Again, what does this have to do with the murder of a woman?
But also, to join campaign groups that are calling for an end to this. We need men to take active bystander training.
What the hell is active bystander training? I assume it's training that tells you what to do if a woman is being sexually harassed or something like that. But honestly, when men notice other men sexually harassing women, they do usually do something about it. The problem is that quite a lot of sexual harassment tends to happen these days privately because quite a lot of men know it's wrong.
We need men to be male teachers talking about this in schools.
I think you would have more male teachers if most of them weren't just called paedophiles. But the rest of it, she just says, oh, I want men to join our cause. Which, of course, you would say she's a campaigner. But yes, you just saw a woman who conflated sexist jokes and sexual harassment with a murder of a woman, when they are completely different crimes done for completely different reasons. And the sexist joke, who cares, honestly? So I wish that was the end of this story, but unfortunately we now have to go to the House of Lords, where something absolutely ridiculous was suggested by Green Party peer Baroness Jones.
And in the week that the woman Sarah Everard was abducted and we suppose killed because remains have been found in a woodland in Kent, I would argue that at the next opportunity for any bill that's appropriate, I might actually put in an amendment to create a curfew for men on the streets after 6 p.m.
What a ridiculous abuse of power. In her defence, she does say might. However, I'm sure Hamza Yusuf, when he first joined politics, said he might put forward a hate crime bill. So I wouldn't put it out of this peer's purview. But imagine something that happens to 6 out of 1 million women every year. Which again, yes, it is very tragic, and I do feel sorry for Sarah Everard and her family, and all victims of murder and their families. But to put a curfew on all men, every single one, after 6 p.m, which is early evening, this is obviously a direct abuse of power should this come in. But I think what's even more ridiculous is what she says straight after she suggests this.
Which I feel would make women a lot safer, and discrimination of all kinds would be lessened.
I mean, I will admit, yes, most murders do tend to happen after 6 p.m, under the cover of night. However, her claim that discriminations of all kinds will be lessened as well? Yeah, men famously are never discriminatory before 6 p.m, and they are especially known for being discriminatory outside in the open. What a ridiculous thing to say. If we stop all men from going outside at 6 p.m, that will solve all of these wokeists' problems. How the 6 people in the House of Lords there didn't laugh her off, I do not know. The guy at the front didn't even really look like he was listening. It looks like he was catching a power nap. But my God, thank God I was awake to notice this, and thankfully, in fact, it got so famous that Mark Drakeford, the First Minister of Wales, was actually asked what he thought of it.
Some people have said sometimes that if there were an area particularly where there were concerns, women maybe being assaulted or feeling particularly scared, that there should be a curfew on men for a period of time. Is that something that you would consider?
So just to hammer that point, Mark Drakeford is directly being asked, would you introduce a curfew to men after 6 p.m?
It wouldn't be on the top of the list of things that we would consider, because it would be at the very best a temporary intervention.
But you would. I'm sorry, to be clear, you say you wouldn't. It's not the top of your list. I can only take it from that you could not rule out that being a potentially something that you would do.
Yes, this presenter is absolutely right to push him on this. He didn't directly say no, which he absolutely should have. In fact, he was going to go into more detail of his ridiculous idea before he was interrupted, quite rightly I should say, by the journalist who is trying to push him on this point.
If there were a crisis and you needed to take dramatic action that allowed that crisis to be drawn down, then of course you'd be prepared to consider all measures that would make a difference.
So in a time of crisis, this would be considered. Exactly what does a time of crisis look like, Mr. Drakeford?
But the sort of measure, the curfew measure that you've described, it could only ever be a temporary answer, and therefore it's not at the top of our list. There are other things that we can do and should do, and we'll work hard with our third sector organisations or local authorities in Wales. As I say, people need to be safe and to feel safe.
Absolutely ludicrous how he didn't just say no. How he couldn't just say no, saying, no, that would be ridiculously immoral, completely unfair to the many innocent men who walk the streets, and many who are also victims on the streets as well as women. But instead he had to say, oh, it might be under consideration, but of course we have a lot more policies that would be considered first. No, just say no. You are never going to curfew men because of the act of a very few men who need to be removed from society. By being put in jail, I don't mean kill them. Anyway, I wish this was the last blackpilling story I had to go through today. But no, Meghan and Harry interview. Royal family very much not racist, says Prince William. Yes, the selfish couple have created such a storm for the royal family that Prince William had to come out and say, no, of course we're not racist, which only idiots would have assumed. Idiots such as Ash Sarkar, who put, in quotes, we are very much not a racist family, obviously quoting Prince William there, and then have Prince William being put up on a throne being carried by a number of black men. Of course, Ash Sarkar, who says that you should absolutely not criticise other cultures and let them perform their own cultural rituals, seems to have a problem with this particular cultural ritual, which is commonplace whenever the royal family visits Tuvalu, which is where this picture was taken. And speaking of Tuvalu, they had a 2008 constitutional referendum voting whether they should get rid of the monarchy. And it was a resounding 65% in favour of keeping the monarchy. So this monarchy is so racist that a predominantly black country decided that they wanted to keep them. I can't believe the island of Tuvalu would be so racist. But I still wouldn't say that was the worst part of this whole affair. On Question Time last night, after it was pointed out that Prince Harry was asked what colour his baby would be, because honestly I don't think that's a terrible question to ask a mixed race couple, one member of the audience had this to say.
I have no idea whether the royal family are racist, to be honest, but The matter is that they have come across as racist.
It doesn't matter whether you are racist or not. You have come across as racist, i.e. I have interpreted what you have said and done as racist, and therefore you need to do something about it. No, they absolutely do not. You being hypersensitive about these things is your own problem, not anyone else's. Please deal with it.
And the interview with Meghan and Harry, I didn't see much of it because the whole thing has been a very embarrassing fiasco.
Why the hell are you getting involved in this conversation if, one, you're not accusing them of being racist, and two, you didn't even watch the interview?
It's just that one member of their family seems to be racist, and I think we should know who.
So we need a witch hunt for one particular member of the royal family, who Meghan's own dad seems to agree it may have just been a stupid question and not racist at all. This seems to be just a person who wants a bit of drama and wants a bit of a witch hunt for her royal family that represents them, backed up by, at the moment, a completely unsubstantiated claim of racism, which wasn't even claimed. All that it was implied by Meghan Markle after Oprah brought it up. And now, because of this attention-seeking gold digger in the royal family spreading rumours, apparently now we have to have a Stasi for the royal family to find the racist. Please have some respect and trust in your royal family. That is what they are there for. They are our heads of state, we are their subjects. And it's taken thousands of years, but we are at a point where we have a constitutional monarchy. That tends to work quite well. And so we have a level of trust in them, as they have a level of trust in us. That seems to keep the whole thing running. Please stop trying to undermine it, because some American bimbo wants attention. Anyway, I feel a bit harsh giving you all these black pills, so white pill time. Tim Davie said privately he would rid the BBC of biased left-wing comedy, and less than a year in, he's been more than good on his word. The MASH Report is no more, and for those of you that don't know, the MASH Report is a satirical, I guess, left-leaning comedy show on the BBC that barely gets any ratings. And thankfully it has been axed. And Nish had a tweet to reply to this. He said, "A lot of people are asking me for a comment and here it is." And all it is a screenshot of the show where he points at a sign saying Boris Johnson is a liar and a racist. My God, I cannot see at all why this show was axed. So while the BBC does seem to be making improvements, I'm still very much on the side of defunding the BBC and having the market decide whether it should carry on. Though as I say, I will take victories where I can get them while it is still a public broadcasting service. But thankfully that is all I have for you today. I'm sorry for all the black pills, but hey, I gave you a little white pill at the end. So, as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.